Hi, good morning, good evening. We are joined today from New York by Mazi, the CEO and founder of OpenFin. Mazi, fantastic to have you with us here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Gautam.
Fantastic. Mazi, as a founder, you've spent half a decade, still ongoing, building the business that you have. You've navigated founding a business before COVID. You've navigated the business through COVID. COVID's accelerated the digital and cloud transformation that many financial institutions and market infrastructure players were already on. For a lot of the entities that migrated their applications and infrastructure to the cloud, they were able to obviously shift their employees to work from home fairly rapidly. A number of other organizations didn't, and some of those challenges persist. What in your view has sort of been your observations of the key challenges and the trends in the capital markets technology space and infrastructure space, that over the last 2 years, and how do you see that sort of unfolding, sort of going forward, in a sort of a post-COVID era?
Yeah, look, it's been an interesting time, and one of the very first challenges we noticed as soon as everybody shut down. There's the cloud part, but there's also the desktop, and immediately people started thinking about the hardware that they needed to have at home, because you can remote into your computer at work using a lot of different technologies that many banks have and have deployed widely. But if you've just got a single screen and you used to have 4 or 6 at the office, then that becomes a massive challenge. I was just with somebody earlier today who was reminiscing when they suddenly realized that everything was going to shut down, and in a moment they thought to call and order hardware because they knew that was going to be the next immediate challenge they have. We did a poll of some of our customers a few weeks in. This is last March and April, and they reported that on average they had about half as many screens at home as they had at work. What that means is if you're using lots of different applications, now you can't see all of them, and you need different tools and different techniques to know about real-time events and kind of the information you need in context. And that's all of the things that OpenFin helps with. So that ability to really manage screen real estate and have a cleaner workflow with fewer monitors became a really big part of where we were able to help.
Fantastic. Mazi, sort of in the context of sort of the frenetic realization, when people woke up to this change, obviously, as I indicated, COVID sort of spurred on a lot of those changes. But sort of before that, I mean, and also now in sort of current times, what are the key challenges, or how would you describe the key challenges that OpenFin looks to solve for organizations and users in particular? I think that would be useful to sort of take people through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I like to think about it is, we are bringing the Apple end user experience to finance at enterprise grade. Right now, nowadays everyone has iPhones or Android phones, and they're used to that delightful phone experience, and so their expectations are raised, and they want that same experience at work, where it's not just a nice to have, it's critical. The ability for multiple apps that you're using to coordinate and work together is, if anything, more needed in this kind of an environment than on your phone when you're, let's say, in your Google Maps app, and right from there you can invoke the Uber app to get you a ride, right? Like, that's a nice to have. It's a great convenience. But at work, that same ability to, see, analytics like at the same instant that you're about to, execute a trade, right? That's critical functionality. So OpenFin provides that infrastructure that enables that same delightful experience, brings together all the different applications that an end user uses into one unified experience with streamlined workflow. And those applications could be internal applications built, by a bank like Standard Chartered, or they might be third-party applications as well from trading platforms, market data providers. And the whole point is that all of them still need to work together so that the end user has one common unified experience.
Mazi, that's fantastic, and I think it's as we've seen, it's one of those things where I remember getting my first mobile phone, when I was a little over 21 years old, and it had this tiny little screen, and it was an Ericsson at the time, and I remember the first time I shifted from an Ericsson to a Nokia and had to sort of relearn a user journey, and then when smartphones came out, it was like a totally different sort of revolutionary experience for that matter. So ultimately it's the equivalent of organizations taking a similar journey, I suppose, but just on a much bigger scale.
Absolutely.
Mazi, what would be sort of interesting to sort of get your take on is your working sort of journey with Standard Chartered, how it started. And maybe just sort of unpack sort of some of the use cases that the organization are applying in terms of the use of OpenFin's technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Our journey at Standard Chartered, in many ways, it has been similar to other banks, but in many ways accelerated as well. So. Typically what happens is we'll start somewhere, like in a division of a bank, and with Standard Chartered, that was in the corporate investment bank, and you always have or it's helpful to have a champion, certainly on the business side, who has a vision for how they want to leverage the technology. And some of that early on, in terms of use cases, was within fixed income. We also had, and that was internal. We also had the FX team with a single dealer platform. It was an external deployment, and a risk management team also started to use OpenFin. So there are a number of different areas that were the early use cases, and then. The other thing that happened, around the same time was that the SC Ventures team started working with us, and they had the early success to rely on, like internal validation from some folks who'd already started using OpenFin, and that made it so much easier for them to go and intro us to lots of other teams within the bank. Which, and they're super generous and kind with their introductions. And when I said, our journey was accelerated, like that intervention, that support from the SC Ventures team really allowed us to go from those few use cases to many within Standard Chartered in a fairly short amount of time. At some other banks, it's literally taken 3-4 plus years to do that same journey. But beyond the early use cases, we're now looking at sales workflows, at wealth management use cases, corporate banking, client portals, and even into the corporate employee experience. And again, this is what we're seeing is that early on, there are really hard use cases that tend to be in the front office where people start to use OpenFin, and then once they use it, they realize that, oh, actually, I can use this same technology to provide that seamless experience across the organization, well outside the front office, into just any employee of the bank, who whether middle office, back office, compliance, who where any end user has multiple apps to do their work, and they need that nice seamless workflow and that integrated experience. So yeah, no, it's been a really, really wonderful partnership with Standard Chartered and SC Ventures.
Thanks, Muzzy. That's wonderful to hear. I think one of the things that we've always found interesting, working with with startups or growth stage technology companies, is that the journey is a partnership. A lot of industry folks talk about digital evolution, digital transformation. I think putting that into practice, is truly a partnership effort. On the back of sort of the comments that you've just made, there's obviously a huge element of collaboration in what it is that you do. There's feedback that you're constantly getting from your clients. OpenFin has managed to acquire a solid roster of clients in the financial services industry, banking, asset management. What is your approach been to client collaboration generally and co-creation and thinking through features and thinking through use cases? I mean, has that always been a seamless experience, and how have you adapted and changed and sort of matured your approach to co-creation? It wasn't so long ago that, a few years ago, incumbent organizations would be fearful of the fintech coming, and that's effectively now changed to an approach where there's, significant collaboration taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, it's not easy. Let me start there. With any large organization, getting that collaboration right, and even just having the right connectivity into the right folks within a firm is hard. Doing that with multiple banks, we're now being used by more than 25 of the largest global banks, and doing that with that many firms is a challenge. It's been many years in the making. We've taken a few approaches that I think were helpful. One is to really stick to the things that our customers really wanted from us, and not trying to do more, and not trying to force technology on them that they weren't ready for. And so, as one example, early on, our product was completely invisible. It was just a web runtime. It ran on a desktop, and you build an app that looks like a native app, and no one ever saw OpenFin. And the reason for that was we realized early that if we tried to present UI to our customers, they immediately didn't want that. They wanted their own UI. But over the years, and particularly in the last few years, that's changed, because many banks and asset managers and others have realized that there's certain elements of the UI that are really commoditized. Things like windowing, notification center, an app launcher, a store. Like these are common components that you would get on any OS, whether it's iOS or Mac OS or Windows. And we saw a change in the what we were being asked for from customers, saying, look, actually, we would like you, OpenFin, right? Now that we've built the trust, they're saying to us, we'd actually prefer for you to deliver this technology to us. It'll cut our costs, it'll accelerate our time to market. And so once we started seeing that demand and hearing from the customers that we actually really want you to do this, then we poured resources into doing that, and launched the Workspace product, which is the visual interface of OpenFin OS earlier this year. And it's been, it's been received really, really enthusiastically by our customers. And now we're getting even more feedback about the look and the feel and the features and all the rest of it. And we're always working hard to listen and make sure we're doing just enough, but not too much.
Fantastic. Muzzy, sort of moving on from sort of collaboration with customers to moving on to industry collaboration. I mean, OpenFin's been instrumental in the establishment of the Financial Desktop Connectivity and Collaboration Consortium. Can you sort of maybe just share a bit more about sort of OpenFin's role in it? What does it seek to accomplish, and how the business community has responded to this? Absolutely.
This is an initiative we're incredibly proud of, FDC3. Back in 2017, the OpenFin interoperability bus was part of the very, very first version of OpenFin that we put out there in 2012. And so the idea of interoperability and two apps connecting and being able to talk to one another, that's been there from the beginning. But as we started seeing a number of banks and asset managers and vendors using the product, we realized that just the basic connectivity wasn't enough, and that what you needed was a common language that the apps could talk over that connectivity in order to be able to interoperate seamlessly, meaning every app doesn't have to create a bespoke protocol with every other app, right? There's a common language, everyone speaks the common language, and then all the apps can seamlessly integrate and interact with one another. So the idea behind it came from actually a dinner that we had in London. We'd heard individually from several banks that this was something that they were interested in seeing, some kind of standardization. We got, I think it was 8-9 banks together for dinner at 1 Lombard Street in London. They have a great basement private room that we were in. And we just had a very open conversation about, like, what does the industry need? How do we make this happen? And a few weeks later, we put out a working group proposal for FDC3. We got, it was maybe 30 firms together for the first few meetings, and worked right through into 2018 in March-ish, I think, when we then contributed FDC3 to Finos, the FinTech Open Source Foundation. And one of the reasons we did that was we knew that for a standard like this to thrive, it really needed to not be sort of just championed by a single vendor, right? And OpenFin from day one had been designed, just its name and everything we've done with the company to be a neutral, independent party. But we still knew that despite all that, that you needed like an added measure of governance around this. So we contributed the FTC3 into Finos. Its usage and the interest in it has increased a lot since then, and we're continuing to work really, really hard on keeping the standard really simple. We think that that's a critical, a really critical thing that needs to happen, because as soon as something has been developed, it's very easy to say, well, let's add this and let's add that, right? Let's add features. And what we've seen is that getting interoperability working requires simple things to work first. And so we're very, very focused on helping everyone implement and have production deployments with FTC3 and interoperability before the standard gets overcomplicated. So on the one hand, we're working hard to keep the standard, and the integrity of the standard simple, and also, getting as many production deployments using FDC3 out there as we can.
Amazing, amazing. Mazi, moving from sort of collaboration with bankers and asset managers to collaboration with the developer community. So I'm building an active developer community is key, to ensuring relevance of a universe of apps. What are the sort of the core principles that OpenFin sort of reverts to when they think, when the organization thinks about how to maintain and grow developer engagement, and by extension, how that effectively impacts the app universe that you're busy sort of building at the moment?
Yeah, look, the developer engagement has been really critical to our success. In a way, one of the built-in conflicts for us from the beginning was that, at almost every bank, the folks that we would engage with were the very people who had already built something like OpenFin within their firm, right? They had built, a container of sorts using other technologies. Frankly, many of them weren't all that interested in stopping what they were doing and using OpenFin. We won over, many of these developers and many of these large organizations one by one. showing them that that we could handle the things that were hard, the things that honestly weren't like moving the needle for them. They needed those capabilities, but they weren't differentiating based on that, and then that they could move faster and they could get more done that would show their business the value of the money that they were investing. It's not something that you're ever done with, right? Like developers expect many things. They expect quality code, great documentation, well thought out APIs. If there's a problem, great support, and we work really, really hard on those things. We've managed to maintain that level of quality as our client roster has scaled. That's also really hard. One of the great things about the model, though, is that anytime one bank needs something, it's quite likely that others do as well, right? And anytime somebody reports a bug or a problem, it's going to be affecting others as well, right? So we now have this really great ecosystem where in a way, almost without folks knowing it, they've mutualized the testing, the APIs, the whole ecosystem around OpenFin, so it's scaled nicely despite the magnitude of the problem.
Amazing. Mazi, the capital markets technology space, the market infrastructure space, organizations are becoming increasingly more tightly coupled together as sort of the capital markets trade cycle becomes more digitized. How has this sort of convergence impacted OpenFin? There's extensive M&A activity taking place in the space. People are opening up their infrastructure to others more easily than what they did in the past. I mean, how's OpenFin fitting into these changes? How are these changes impacting OpenFin at the current point in time?
Yeah, look, it's been really interesting to see because we've now had many occurrences where two firms that were both using OpenFin either merged or one acquired the other. And one of the great things about that is that as you know, anytime M&A activity happens, one of the biggest problems, right? After you work out the deal is how do we integrate? How do we get our technologies work together? How do we realize the synergies that someone wrote into the great PowerPoint that was the reason for the deal in the first place? And at a number of these organizations, the fact that they were already both using OpenFin made that job much easier, and also in a way then allowed them to have immediately the next idea, which is that, well, we should be doing this more broadly across our organization, and that this strategy of normalizing our applications on this standardized infrastructure, using the standardized FDC3 APIs, architecting on web, that all of these things make it very, very easy to scale within your own organization, but also in the context of M&A activity.
Fantastic. You're talking about organizations merging and corporate actions and just market activity in general, and the digital asset space has pretty much sort of gone through a significant ramp since 2017, 2018. The momentum's picked up significantly, even more recently. Many large financial institutions are preparing their forays into the digital asset space. How does OpenFin see itself supporting organizations who are entering the digital asset space? And how is the growth in digital assets impacting OpenFin's business and future strategy?
Yeah, so look, this is something that we've been thinking a lot about, and as you said, right, there's been a lot of exuberance, and then some cooling, and now we're back to a lot of interest in the space. One of the things that we see, and I think this was true before sort of digital assets, and but certainly you're seeing this trend again. Is that when with these early kinds of innovations where they haven't yet really scaled. Basically, in the very early use cases to to make them work, often what you have is screens. You have it's end users who are looking at something, they're visualizing something, and they're sometimes clicking and trading or doing other activities like that, right? And so that for us creates an opportunity because all of this stuff is new. It's you don't have sort of like legacy applications that need to be like re-platformed, right? It gives these firms who are focused on this the ability to imagine the process from scratch. And for us that's exciting because it allows them to really unlock the full power of what OpenFin can provide. And so we're still there's some early use cases that we're excited about, but we're still thinking really hard about what else can we do to support this trend and to really help unlock the value that everyone believes is there.
Indeed. We watch that intently. Now, with the solid foundation that you've built over 5-6 years and a good momentum in place for the business, what can we expect from OpenFin in the next 12 to 24 months? And where's the organization placing its energy and its focus?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, it's all about the ecosystem, and for the ecosystem, that's really synonymous with interoperability. So big focus on FDC3 and all the underlying infrastructure that really makes that work. We're also working on a lot of integrations, direct integrations with the common systems that folks use, like Salesforce and Bloomberg and Excel, and many of these are already there, and there are many more that are on the way. The other two big areas are mobile and cloud, and I mentioned earlier that we've really stuck to our knitting and to what people really wanted from us. We were actually very 10 years ago we had spent a fair amount of time in mobile, and we realized at this point everybody wants just desktop, and so that's what we did. Nowadays we're getting a lot of demand for all of what we've delivered on the desktop on mobile as well. So that's a huge focus. And then increasingly, as firms are getting more comfortable with the cloud, they're telling us, look, we're still building a lot of stuff on the back end that we really don't feel like we need to build, and we shouldn't build. And if you guys can deliver that to us in the same seamless way as you have on the front end, and it all plugs in together, then that would be our preferred choice. And so that's another big focus area for us going into next year and beyond.
Thank you, Mazi. Mazi, I think our time is up. Thank you for sitting up late in New York and taking the time to share your infinite wisdom and knowledge on the space and telling us what OpenFin is up to. I look forward to seeing you in person soon, but really, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gautam. It was my pleasure.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
Cheers.